Are American farmers in deep trouble? So, from the suggestions from a number of my listeners, I started looking through a number of different agricultural articles in the last week to 10 days, and I've been finding a lot of red flags and warning signs about American farmers. And it's not just the trade war escalating and how China has canceled a lot of soybean contracts and also other agricultural purchases that China has canceled. So there's a number of different ways from what it looks like that the American farmer and probably farmers in other areas, we already know about the farming problems in China, whether it's the African swine flu, the army ringworm, the avian bird flu, those other problems that China's having. But it looks like the American farmer, their problems in a lot of different ways are escalating as well. So just this week, I saw articles ranging from that the average American farmer now has, I think, $1.3 million in debt. The average U.S. farm, $1.3 million in debt, and now the worst farming crisis in modern history is upon us, according to Michael Snyder and his blog, and he's claiming it's going to be similar to the Great Depression in 1930s. I guess that was around the Dust Bowl, or the Dust Bowl, I think, was before then in Oklahoma, maybe 10 years before that. So he says, leading up to this year, farm incomes have been trending lower for most of the past decade, and meanwhile, farm debt levels have been absolutely exploding. Well, this is how people, when their incomes drop, a lot of people maintain their standard of living then is with debt, so that would make sense. So U.S. farmers were desperate for a really good year, but instead 2019 has been a total disaster. He's been documenting due to endless rain and catastrophic flooding, millions of acres of prime farmland didn't get planted at all this year, and yields on tens of millions of other acres are expected to be way, way below normal. As a result, the United States is facing the worst farming crisis in modern American history, and this comes at a time when U.S. farms are drowning in more debt than ever before. In fact, the latest numbers that they have shows that the average U.S. farm is $1.3 million in debt, and debt-to-asset ratios are seeing the same squeeze, with more farms moving into a ratio exceeding 80% debt-to-asset ratios. Wow, that's pretty bad. Barrett notices each year... Barrett notes each year since 2009 has seen an increase in the average amount of total debt among farmers, and 2017 was no exception. Average debt rose 10% to $1.3 million. The biggest increase was in long-term debt such as land. So farming in the 21st century has become an extraordinarily risky business, and countless U.S. farmers were already on the verge of going under even before we got to 2019, and that's with an escalating trade war now with the U.S. and China, where the customers that these farmers have, some of these markets, whether it's soybeans or some others, China was one of the main top 2 or 3 customers. And I was looking at a commodity price index for agricultural raw index on indexmundi.com. And really that index, it has been on a downtrend with very little rallies since it looks like April 2011. So that looks about the peak for the agricultural raw commodities index, and it's been on a downtrend pretty much since. So that has not helped the American farmer either. But I don't think U.S. consumers are going to benefit from, they're not going to get the benefits of lower food prices. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I was just out eating dinner tonight at a local barbecue restaurant, and they used to have good portions up until when I ate there tonight. The beef brisket and the pulled chicken, the portions were half or less. So just crazy. That I in my opinion, based on the research I've looked at, and I'll attach articles and I'll read some of this stuff for you guys as well, but Michael Snyder seems to be tracking a lot of this, and my listeners told me also to look at the Grande solar minimum as well. So it looks like the American farmer is having to deal with a bunch of different problems, many different issues, and none of them appear to be beneficial to the American farmer right now. Even the supposedly $26 billion in farm subsidies or bailouts that President Trump has promised, a lot of farmers are saying that that's going to be nowhere near enough. So on top of the debt issue that farmers are now taking, and if you want to read more about the debt issue, I'll put the article in it. I'm not going to read the whole article. But now, according to the federal government, 19 million acres of farmland went unplanted with crops this year. That is a lot. Okay, so let me scroll down the article and get this information for you guys. Agricultural producers reported they were not able to plant crops on more than 19.4 million acres in 2019, according to a new report released by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This marks the most prevented plant acres reported since United States Department of Agriculture's Farm Service Agency began releasing the report in 2007, and 17.49 million acres more than reported at this time last year. So this is the largest number that the United States Department of Agriculture has ever reported for a single year, and it is nearly 17.5 million acres greater than the last year's final tally of less than 2 million acres. So the 19.4 million acres that were not planted are only part of the story. Most farmers were able to get seeds in the ground despite the challenging conditions, which includes flooding, rains, cold weather. There's been a lot of extra rain and flooding throughout the Midwest and other parts of the U.S. where farmers are. But in much of the country, the crops are not in good shape. In fact, according to the latest crop progress report, only 57% of the corn is considered to be in, quote, good or, quote, excellent shape. Unfortunately, the nation's soybean crop is in even worse shape at this point. Only 54% of the soybeans are in, quote, good or, quote, excellent shape. In addition, only 8% of the U.S. spring wheat crop has been harvested so far. This is sharply below the 30% 5-year average. So what does all this mean? It means that we have a real crisis on our hands. A lot less crops are being grown, and a substantial percentage of the crops that are being grown are not in good shape. Yields are going to be way down across the board, and that means that U.S. agricultural production is going to be way, way below initial expectations. In other words, we are going to grow a lot less food than usual, which is, again, like I said, not going to be beneficial to the consumers, that the farmers are not doing well, that there's not a bumper crop. One bad year is not going to be the end of the world, but what if things don't bounce back next year? So many experts are issuing very ominous warnings about what is ahead as weather patterns continue to shift, and some believe that what we have witnessed so far is just the very beginning of this crisis. Almost every day there are new headlines about extreme weather and records being broken. For example, one community in Colorado just got pummeled by hail the size of softballs. And then he's going on and on about some other weather problems, but this is a crisis that is going to affect all of us. He wishes everyone could get to understand it. Unfortunately, a lot of people out there are not going to take this seriously. A lot of people are not. I think people will eventually notice at the grocery store and at the restaurant. Not everyone has noticed. My listeners to this podcast, you guys, if you're new to this channel, you're starting to notice. I've been bringing it to attention. You've been paying attention to the Chapwood Inflation Index, hopefully, and you've noticed shrinkflation at either the consumer staple stores like Target or Walmart, or the grocery store, or also at restaurants that your portion size is decreasing. I just talked about tonight that I was expecting a good amount of brisket and a good amount of pulled chicken, and guess what? I got none of that. It's a good thing I took a protein shake before I went out to dinner, and I'm gonna go do some lifting later because I was still hungry. But, you add this thing up. So you add up the trade war escalating with China. So American farmers who are selling soybeans, they just lost one of their best customers with this trade war. I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. I think the U.S. and China looks like they're buying more soybeans from Brazil. There was an 8% increase in soybean purchases from Brazil by China recently that was announced. So I don't see any hints that the U.S. versus China escalating trade war is going to end anytime soon. In fact, I think both sides benefit from it not ending, and it looks like not only is this an escalating trade war, that this is a larger and more pronounced and more complete Cold War, some type of Cold War that's more than just economic now at this point. And you add that with the debt levels now that the American farmers have, and then you add that with how so much of the fields were unplanted, or even the crop yields on the stuff that was planted is not good. And then you add that with the it looks like there's a number of different stories. I read a story with the Chinese data, with the Chinese food price data, talking about the trade war. So one story quoted a bunch of farmers in the Midwest who went to an agricultural conference with Trump's, I think, Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue. And there was a bunch of angry farmers there. So I have the article up. It's from a couple days ago, August 12th. Earlier this week, Mary Pappenfuss of the Huffington Post. Farmers lash out at Trump after latest trade war blow from China. American farmers are attacking President Trump in the wake of a new hit from China, which comes as part of the lingering trade war between the countries. Trump's, quote, strategy of constant escalation and antagonism has worsened the situation. Roger Johnson, president of the National Farmers Union, the nation's second largest general farmers group, told Bloomberg family farmers and ranchers, quote, can can't withstand this kind of pressure much longer, he added. It's really getting bad out here. Bob Kylan, a North Dakota farmer of 35 years, told CNBC, Trump is ruining our markets. China canceled all purchases of U.S. agricultural products last weekend. The retaliatory action came after Trump announced 10% tariffs on an additional $300 billion of Chinese imports set to begin in September. China's move is a body blow to thousands of farmers and ranchers who are already struggling to get by, said Zippy Duval, president of the American Farmer Bureau Federation. American agricultural exports to China dropped by half last year due to Trump's trade war, and farm income fell by 16%, Time reports. And over the last 5 years, and remember I said agricultural raw commodities index has dropped a lot since 2011, so that's not helping farmers either. And over the last 5 years, net farm income has plunged by nearly half, from $123.4 billion from $123.4 billion in 2013 to $63 billion last year. So there was input costs on the rise. For a lot of that, there was higher oil prices up until recently. So for a lot of farmers that are doing this massive scale factory farming, their costs probably were rising too, from what I imagine. Farmers unloaded on Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue last week at a listening session at the annual Farm Fest in Minnesota. Gary Wertish, president of the Minnesota Farmers Union, criticized Trump's go-it-alone approach and the trade war's long-term devastating damage. Brian Thalman, president of the Minnesota Corn Growers Association, attacked Trump for saying farmers were doing, quote, great again. We are not starting to do great again, he said. We are starting to go down very quickly. Others expressed concerns that the trade war Others expressed concerns that the trade with China for agriculture will be lost forever. There is a lot of stress out there. Perdue conceded at the listening session and attempted to reassure farmers that markets will return once a deal is negotiated. But like I said, I don't think both sides of this trade war want a deal right now, because Trump he gave a win-win deal to China, and China refused. This was just in the last couple weeks. There was a couple times where Trump offered China 2 win-win deals and China refused both. But he also scolded the crowd of thousands. If your solution is to forget about what China has done and sell and trade with them anyway with cheating, then I just fundamentally disagree with you. So the agriculture secretary also appeared to indicate that farmers were whining too much, joking, what do you call 2 farmers in a basement? A wine cellar. The Minnesota Farmers Union responded in a tweet, writing, farmers are not whining. Their ability to make a living is threatened. We won't stop talking about it until this reckless trade policy stops. Trump has talked about coming up with multi-billion-dollar farmer subsidies that could cushion the cost of his trade war. The Trump administration has already rolled out 2 rounds of farm bailouts expected to total $28 billion. I think earlier in the show I said 26, so I stand corrected. It's 28, but apparently a lot of farmers say it's nowhere near enough. No other industry hurt by the trade war is receiving taxpayer aid, and the subsidies are going to the counties that voted the most for Trump. So 9 in 10 counties that voted for Trump have received subsidies to fight the trade war. $8 billion so far, with at least $16 billion to come, according to a journalist. That's one trade war article with farmers. There's another trade war article that says the exact opposite. So it looks like American farmers, are very, very divided. I don't know if there's a lot of farmers in the middle about the trade war. It seems that it's very polarizing with their opinion on the trade war. So this Zero Hedge article that came out 2 days later says, quote, he's doing the right thing. Iowa farmers back Trump, brush off trade war. American farmers haven't exactly loved the Trump farm bailouts. Many have complained that they have so far favored the biggest farmers, but that hasn't changed their minds about supporting President Trump in 2020. Even as the trade war with China crushes the ag sector, farmers in Iowa, a critical swing state and one that is currently crawling with Democratic Party primary contenders who attended the Iowa State Fair, still overwhelmingly support President Trump. Apparently Trump won that jar contest for picking the candidate, and the mainstream media didn't cover it, according to an informal survey of farmers carried out by the Wall Street Journal. Iowa farmers, who are among the largest producers of corn, soybeans, and pork, largely said they appreciated the bailouts even if they didn't entirely compensate for trade war-related losses, and applauded President Trump for at least trying to do the right thing and make surely the U.S. is treated fairly. So if you didn't, my point here is if you only read one of these articles, you wouldn't understand that it seems that this is a very divisive issue with American farmers, that some farmers are on one side of this trade war. The mainstream media, the Huffington Post article, presented it entirely one way. Now you have this article saying something entirely different. He's doing a good job in trying to make sure we're treated fairly, said Kevin Prevost, a fifth-generation farmer who raises corn, soybeans, cattle, and hogs on about 1,400 acres near Bloomfield, Iowa. Mr. Prevost showed zero uncertainty when asked whether he would vote for Mr. Trump again in 2020. Quote, "You bet," he said. China said earlier this month that it would suspend all imports of U.S. agricultural goods. Then the U.S. said it would delay tariffs on some Chinese consumer goods too, as Wilbur Ross explained on CNBC Wednesday morning. Avoid hitting American consumers in the pocketbook during the holiday shopping season. Democrats have been struggling to convince farmers that Trump doesn't have their best interests at heart. Pete Buttigieg said during an interview at the fairgrounds on Tuesday that Trump's actions have hurt farmers in Iowa and elsewhere. Okay, and this is a pretty interesting chart you can see in the article after I put it in the information description section. For amount of Iowa soybean stocks. June Iowa soybean stocks. Looks like there's a lot more Iowa soybean stocks than even 2010, 2012, 2014, 16, 18. There's a lot of on-farm and off-farm stocks. There's no evidence to me that this is part of an actual plan. Oh, that's Buttigieg. I think he just poked them in the eye to see what would happen, and what happened is that they retaliated. But those words unfortunately didn't resonate. He's doing the right thing, said the farmer Leo Balk, a fifth-generation farmer who raises corn, soybeans, oats, beef, and dairy cows on about 300 acres near Hampton, Iowa. It hurts, but his concept is absolutely right. So Trump has hinted at another farm bailout as well. He's already invested billions of dollars in retaining farmers' loyalty. Why stop now? Okay, on top of that, recently, yesterday, Friday, I pulled this article up on Friday. John Deere cuts guidance for second straight quarter amid farmer turmoil. So all these factors are coming together. Let me just read this quick. For those asking this morning if the U.S.-China trade war is hurting the economy and America's farmers, look no further than heavy industrial equipment giant John Deere, which this morning cut its earnings guidance for second straight quarter and announced a review of costs as U.S. farmers battered by trade and weather disruptions were unable to splurge on expensive new tractors. While Deere's Q3 results were dismal, with the company missing on both the top line, reporting third quarter net sales of $8.97 billion, down 3.4% year over year, and below the estimate of $9.38 billion, and the bottom line with Q3 adjusted EPS of 2.71, missing estimates of 2.84, its guidance was worse. And the key here is guidance, which means that they expect even worse quarters. If you're not familiar with guidance, that means they're projecting out over the next couple quarters or over the next year or two, and they're expecting more bad news. Deere cut its net income and its construction and forestry equipment sales forecast for the full year, which makes a lot of sense because there's not as much base metal mining going on now, and some of the other commodity prices have not been doing well as well. So a lot of the stuff that's reliant on China, so certain types of energy, certain types of base metal, certain types of construction material, not doing as well price-wise. Okay, let me continue with the article. Deere cut its net income and its construction and forestry equipment sales forecast for the full year, with the guidance missing the average analyst estimate. The company now sees full year net income about $3.2 billion, down from $3.3 billion previously and below the sell side estimate of $3.29 billion. The company also cut its full year construction and forestry equipment sales forecast to plus 10% from plus 11, so it was a small drop there, and below the 11% growth estimate. Deere also said it was, quote, conducting a thorough assessment of its cost structure and initiating a series of actions to take the organization more structurally efficient and profitable, end quote. For fiscal 2019, equipment sales are now projected to rise about 4%, with net income forecast at $3.2 billion. The Illinois company said 3 months ago it predicted 5% equipment sales growth and 3%. So the growth projections are already dropping about 10% or more for the equipment sales growth, and the profits are down about $100 million, at least for projections. And so with Q3, the fiscal Q3 earnings missing estimates and the sharp guidance, Deere prices fell 3.7% in pre-market trading on Friday before recovering some ground. The stock has badly underperformed the S&P since the start of the year. So that is reflecting low agricultural commodity prices and the trade war. So if you want to monitor this, I would look at John Deere stock then. The quarterly results reflected the high degree of uncertainty that continues to overshadow the agricultural sector. CEO Samuel Allen said in a statement Friday, concerns about export market access, near-term demand for commodities such as soybeans, and overall crop conditions have caused many farmers to postpone major equipment purchases. According to Bloomberg, the reason for the disappointing results was that U.S. farmers were hesitating to upgrade their aging fleets of Deere's iconic yellow and green tractors as the U.S.-China trade war stretches into a second year, undermining crop demand and fanning fears of recession. At the same time, record rainfall in the U.S. planting season gave way to hot, dry weather that has dimmed the outlook for yields and farmer incomes. So, talking with some of my listeners, they told me to start researching this Grande solar minimum, and I'm clearly not an expert at this. I only spent about 20 or 30 minutes earlier on Friday doing so, but it appears that if you're not familiar with it, I'll attach some links to some videos or some articles to take a look at it. But the way the Grande solar minimum is, the theory of it is that the sun has a lot of cycles, and at this point there's going to be, the predictions of the experts including NASA is that there's going to be a lot less sunspots. So what that means is that when it is sunny out, the overall amount of sun and heat is going to be a lot less, and the temperatures are going to be cooler, and there's going to be a lot more potential for extreme weather and also rain. So all these factors together, you have the overarching theme of the Grande solar minimum, which is more of Mother Nature's climate change, not man-made climate change, but that's Mother Nature's climate change with actual cycles that go back a very long time throughout the history of the Earth based on the sun. And all these things together with unproductive crop, unplanted amounts of land for farmers, unproductive crop yields, too much debt by the farmers, the escalating trade war, the farmers, some of the farmers losing some of their biggest customers with China. On top of, adding all these factors together, bad news for farmers, I think. Not good news for farmers. And then, I'm not even talking about the difference between genetically modified food and organic food. I've lost 20 pounds now in just the last 3 or 4 months, going mostly paleo. I've completely cut sugar out of my diet, very little carbs. So, the average American eats a lot of poison, especially sugar and carbs. And a lot of these, factory farms the protein is not necessarily healthy. There's a lot of bad debt at the farms. The agriculture in this country, I think, will eventually fix. It's going to take a long time, though. But when you add all this stuff up, I could talk about some of the commodity prices, too. So, the base metals, the commodity fuel energy index is 12-month change. It's down 20%. According to this chart on Index Mundi, 12-month change, down about 20%. Australian coal is down a lot. Crude oil, a lot of it's down double digits. Depending upon which type of crude, it's down at least 15% already in the last 12 months. A lot of the fuels are down. I think a lot of this, guys, has to do with the global economy slowing down, but also big on China slowing down. There's a lot of it's China slowing down, and then China's not buying American agriculture stuff. There's not a lot of agricultural products where the price is up in the last 12 months. Looks like barley's up about 14% in the last 12 months. Maize or corn's up about 18%, depending upon which contract. Oranges are down almost 36% in the last 12 months. In China, food prices, remember I read that list. Chicken prices, I think, were up around 11 or 12% since last July in China, but the poultry prices of chicken here in the U.S. on the commodities markets are down 24%. Although I would expect then maybe China would eventually want to rethink importing chicken from here. It would make some sense for them to do so, but then they would want to be helping. They would be helping American farmers. It would make a lot of sense for China to want to import something that was down that much in price, but I don't think they will do it for now, because they don't seem to want to be helping American farmers at all. There's a lot of red here for a lot of planted crops in the commodities industry the last 12 months. I didn't do my nickel lecture. I'll work on that tomorrow then, probably. So all this, when you add it all up, it does not... Oh, I got a bunch of super chats. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jonas Winbridge. Thank you, Pebbleman. Sebastian, 2207. Australian dollars, Sebastian. Thank you very much. Michael Holiday, thank you for the super chat. Yeah, I'm not an expert in grand solar minimum, but it looks like that is playing a factor into here. China has had a lot of flooding too, and so has other parts of Southeast Asia. There's always rain there, but it appears that some of the crops in Southeast Asia and the southern part of China have been flooded. Flooded as well. So if people, you know, even if the economy is bad or the economy is good, but if people are not being fed, especially in a bad economy, that normally is how like revolutions start. When people cannot afford food, that's when people head to the streets. That's when people's standard of living drops and they can't afford the same food. They have to eat really bad food or no food at all. Or they have to cut back on meals. That's what starts the pitchforks and torches, the revolutions. And I was also going to bring up another point here, and this is because I'm always referring through financial history, is that with this stuff that I'm bringing up with the problems with the American farmers, so one of the things that triggered there was a bunch of factors that triggered the October 1929 crash, but there was a lot of American farmers that defaulted on their loans in the late 1920s. So the local banks that lent out to the farmers, some of these local banks, almost all their loans were to farmers. And so the farmers couldn't pay back their loans because commodity prices, the farmers were just going bankrupt. The commodity prices were falling. There was no demand for, dropping demand for some of the agricultural products. And so when the farmers failed and couldn't pay back the loans, the banks failed too. So I would be on the lookout then that some of these banks that are in the Midwest that deal with mostly all farmers, they're going to have problems too. So some of these local and medium-sized banks that focus on farmers and in the Midwest, they could risk going bankrupt or needing big bailouts too. Oh, there's a lot of better agricultural techniques like hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics. None of that stuff's being implemented. There's a lot of good innovation that can be done that's not being done. This factory farming model, though, I don't think it's going to work for much longer. Especially because of how fat and sick most Americans are, morbidly obese. Now you can't, you're not even allowed to criticize them. It's body shaming and all this other stuff. You're not even allowed to make suggestions to help people anymore. Even if you word it the right way. There's a bunch of documentaries out about this. I can't remember all the different ones. I think you're talking about like it's synced up where the fish, it's in the water and then the fish fertilize, you grow underwater. Or part of the growth is underwater. The fish are in a fish tank and the fish fertilize the stuff under the water. I'm trying to remember how it goes. I saw these documentaries years ago. I do sleep. It's only a little after midnight here. I'm a night owl. I function best in the afternoons and evenings. Hey, Kyle, thank you for the kind words. I am legit as F-word. Let's not drop an F-bomb. I don't want someone reporting it trying to demonetize this. There are a couple trolls out there who thumbs down every single video who are not one of my almost 100 Patreon account contributors who go out of their way to give me a 1-star review on iTunes. There's one or two people like that, and then they thumbs down every single video. Think about that. Who has the time to go to every single one of my videos and put a thumbs down? What type of life must that person have? Jonas thinks billions of people will die. It is inevitable. I don't know about billions, but yes. If food prices for the consumer continue to rise, people's standard of livings will be dropped. There will be people who will not be able to afford food without government subsidies and, welfare or EBT or whatever it's going to be called. But the first thing that happens now is the portion size is dropping, so you're getting less food for more dollars or more of your other local currency. I'm not sure if it's that guy still. I saw him a couple months ago. Yeah, so individual solutions, maybe you grow your own vegetables or herbs. You can start your own herb garden. There's ways to do that. You can do organic stuff, grow your own fruits or vegetables, and some herbs, make your own. By the way, one of the best ways to cook healthy is to use a lot of your own seasoning. Spices and herbs. If you use fresh herbs and seasoning spices instead of cooking with, let me think here, with lots of cream and stuff like that, you can cut out a lot of fat. So just use spices instead. Marinate, spice rub. If you don't know how to cook, that's how you can save a lot of money. Rather than going out to eat a lot, you can learn how to cook. Watch the Food Network. There's a lot of ways to learn how to cook. Okay, I'm looking at listener questions and comments. Matthew, I appreciate the kind words, but I prefer women. But I appreciate the kind words, though. I prefer the company of women. But I'm glad you love my content. If you have a good spice rack, you buy a lot of good spices. You can play around, make good spice rubs on your meat. If I'm growing up chicken, I marinate it for at least 24 hours before. I have a really good drunken cowboy steak marinade. Peter asked a very good question on the super chat. Thank you for the super chat, Peter. Is this GE fraud thing about to downgrade their BBB debt and blow up the corporate junk market? Eventually, my educated guess is yes, it will. This may drag on for more than a couple weeks, maybe even more than a couple months. Did you see that immediately as soon as this Harry Markopolos report came out, CNBC allowed a bunch of people on the General Electric board of directors, on the General Electric management, to just come on and trash a legitimate American hero? Okay, in my opinion, I read Harry Markopolos' book. I almost got him on for an interview in 2010 and 11. I tried really, really hard to get him back on for an interview for you guys back then. I spoke to him through LinkedIn and messages and stuff. I believe that Harry Markopolos is one of the true good guys here in the United States. He is a true, honest American hero, whistleblower. He was worried. If you read his book, he thought he was going to be killed for the information he released. And he thought that the government was going to cover it all up. And for CNBC, for the talking heads in the mainstream financial media on Bloomberg and CNBC to allow people from General Electric to come on and just slander him like crazy is horrible. Horrible. They intentionally don't talk about any of the stuff in the report. You can download, you can go to gefraud.com. I think that's where the report is. gefraud.com that Harry Markopolos has, and you can read the report for yourself. Okay, it's available publicly with all the information there about the fraud, about the accounting fraud, the insurance fraud. And instead, I listened to part of the interview from the General Electric people, and basically it was just, just straight on public relations team trash Harry Markopolos constantly. I'm not so sure Jack Welch was really an icon. There has been a lot of whispers for years that General Electric was not as good and tight of a ship as Jack Welch claimed. Now, they did manufacture stuff, and they did have high-quality appliances, but GE Capital was already starting to do bad things. And then under Immelt, GE Capital, GE turned into basically a hedge fund, turned into an investment bank, similar to General Motors. So the people that are coming on the mainstream financial media, the spin, and this is the same shit that happens with Tesla, guys. So the mainstream financial media, because it's a large corporation against a hardworking, honest American hero and whistleblower. And I think Harry Markopolos, I know he's getting paid for that by a hedge fund. He has to earn a living for his family for some money. He can't do everything for free. Just like me, I can't do all my content for free. I mean, YouTube, 3 or 4 years ago, YouTube almost totally ruined me financially. There was a point where my income went from like $4,000 a month down to almost zero. Okay, how many people could survive that? Harry Markopolos was working in the hedge fund industry. He blew the whistle on Madoff, and then I don't think he got any jobs for a while. Okay, he became a certified fraud examiner, and it's just ridiculous. So they're trashing Harry Markopolos, in my opinion. I think he's a Democrat, but so we don't agree on everything politically. So his solution is he still prefers Democrat politics, but I still believe the guy is an American hero. He works hard. He wants to protect the American people, the American citizen. He wants to do the right thing. He wants a better country. And then the mainstream financial media allows these people from GE to just come on and trash the man. And then they don't even argue about any of the points in the report. It's just about trashing Markopolos. And then, he's taking money from a hedge fund. Therefore, all of it's a lie. I heard that even when Harry Markopolos was being interviewed by the Yahoo Finance people and when he was on CNBC. Well, why are you first of all, the mainstream financial media people, a lot of them are so lazy they probably didn't even read any of the report. And the producers that were sending messages in their earpiece probably didn't read the report either. You heard the Canadian farmers are getting bailed out? Well, China canceled a bunch of pork orders, right, from Canada. So China claimed that there was some type of antibiotic or something in there that they don't allow pork to have for importing, but a lot of people think it was actually related to Huawei. And China was punishing Canada because of Canada's role in the arrest of the Huawei CFO. So who knows what the truth is about that. But China claims it wasn't related to Huawei. They claim that there was a antibiotic or certain type of additive, ricin or something like that, in the pork. It's tough to know the exact amount of companies that are doing what would be legally defined as accounting fraud. They have so many good corporate lawyers now, Carl, that it's really, there's a very big gray area. The SEC is not going to prosecute any of this anyway. The securities, look, GE, go and listen to the interview with Francine McKenna, the Francine McKenna interview, and she said I did this interview earlier this year or at the end of last year, I can't remember. And I put it in the GE, at the end of the GE live stream yesterday, the Francine McKenna interview, and she gets tips from all these insiders and all these others about enormous levels of accounting fraud and corporate fraud. And she's a accounting professor here in the DC area at one of the universities. She's an accounting professor. And then she writes articles on accounting fraud. And she was talking about how General Electric has disclosed in their annual reports and financial statements for years now that the SEC is routinely investigating them for accounting fraud. But General Electric did not get criminal charges. So they were always using aggressive, either borderline or very straightforward accounting fraud. They're always pushing the line, though, of what is accounting fraud and what is not. And the SEC just find them. So I think I know I went on a tangent, Peter, but I think this thing could go longer, quite a bit longer than Harry Markopolos and other people think about the fraud, because in this narrative controlled environment now, there's two different sets of reality now. Okay? Or at least a lot of people think so. I mean, look at how Elon Musk has managed to keep that all the accounting fraud and all that stuff at Tesla going. Okay, Tesla's egregious accounting fraud. We could do an entire show about all the red flags at Tesla, according to some of the smartest minds on Wall Street. John Hempton of Bronte Capital, and he likes Tesla Motors. He has a Tesla, but he said the company is garbage. He said there's 300 red flags. He said it's complete total fraud, complete total accounting fraud. But Tesla shares haven't crashed. They're able to raise capital. They have most of the mainstream financial media journalists fooled. There's a lot of professional investors that are still fooled. I get told every day by someone who likes Tesla that there's no way it could be an accounting fraud. A lot of them can't even read financial statements. They don't even know what they're talking about. That perception will eventually change. So General Electric can get away with this longer than you think. This could go on for 6 months, could go on for a year. But yes, ultimately, if GE does go, there will be increased scrutiny on a lot of other corporations. Because General Electric was considered at one point the best corporation in the United States. They made the best light bulbs, the best appliances. That hasn't been the case, like many of my listeners and myself said last night, for over a decade. The power of memes, that's part of it. It's controlling the narrative. This is why it's controlling the narrative. This is why Elon Musk is leaking emails to favored journalists, even though he's not supposed to, and it's technically violating SEC rules. And this is why Elon Musk is always issuing new press releases about how Tesla is going to be in this new type of technology. It's robo-taxis, or it's insurance, or all this other stuff. You know why? Because he's trying to sell people on the possibility that Tesla is innovative and that Tesla is a software or technology company and anything but a shitty car manufacturer that grows production and loses more money for every single car that's produced. So this is narrative control. This is straight up political spin and marketing. This is the old school sleight of hand magician's tricks, but using marketing and social media instead. So it's like, don't look behind the curtain. Look at what's happening in front of you to the side, this illusion instead. Elon Musk is a master at this. He's a sly fox. So General Electric will do very similar stuff to what Elon Musk is doing now. Now, General Electric has way more debt on their balance sheet than Tesla does right now. Tesla Motors no longer has a monopoly on electric cars. Look at all the competition that's coming. And their gross margins minus their subsidy tax credit there that people were getting was like 16.7. 16.7 gross margins. Very, very bad. Okay, another super chat from Peter. Peter, I think then the junk bond market needs a bailout. I think that could be a credit freeze, and I think that's why there's been 2 emergency meetings that we know about since Christmas Eve, including the Steve Mnuchin botched one, and then also the meeting that was reported by TheStreet.com at the end of May. But I really think that those are the only 2 we know about, and I think there's even more emergency meetings about the junk bond market and the corporate bond market. And remember yesterday, guys, you haven't even seen it on Zero Hedge, that chart. I pulled the CLO stuff. All those CLOs could go bankrupt. It's all covenant light junk bond debt in those CLOs. Those collateralized loan obligations, $600 billion worth. All of them could go to zero. Okay, that's all junk bond level garbage. It's all toxic. And if you read that article, there is some crazy stuff the Fed released in the research paper. They're saying that Wall Street sent this toxic covenant-like derivative sausage. They sent this stuff to the Caribbean for the Caribbean to make that sausage of the CLOs, and then it was exported back here to sell to American insurance companies, pension funds, to sell to Europe, and also to sell to Japanese banks. So ultimately, I think, and this is why the Fed's not going to be able to reduce their balance sheet anymore and why they're preparing for QE. Not only does the Treasury have to sell more Treasury bonds, but the CLOs are probably going to have to be bought, probably all of them. You're going to have to look at who's holding that CLO garbage. Those insurance companies could be in trouble. Some of those insurance companies have a lot of CLOs because they were teasing higher yields. But the underlying assets are garbage. So yes, if GE starts to melt down, there could be a credit freeze like in November, December. Remember, for about 2 weeks, there was no junk bond debt issuances, and there was very little or no corporate bond issuances. We all know that by now, if you pay attention to the markets a lot, and you've seen Danielle DiMartino Booth talk about this, that the triple B level is bullshit. Okay, the triple B level, almost all the companies in the triple B level, and triple B makes up now about 40% of all the corporate bonds. Triple B companies are really junk. But no one wants to downgrade it. Hey, thanks for the kind words, Craig. I appreciate it. Did I just get another super chat? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 super chats. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Okay, well, we're at 45 minutes. It's getting pretty late. It's almost 1 a.m. here. I still have a lot of energy, but my voice is getting sore. I wasn't planning on going this long. I will put links to the articles and some of the videos on the Grand Solar Minimum if you want to research this tomorrow. And I do have more content planned for tomorrow. If there are any other new current events, say there's another secret meeting between Steve Mnuchin and the Plunge Protection Team. If there's something else that drops on his Twitter or something like that, I'll release it. I actually just saw another interesting article from one of the Chinese state-owned media talking about how HSBC may be bought out by one of the Chinese financial companies. So that's something maybe I can report on too. Okay, guys, bye for now.